Why your mind won't let good things feel good. There is a specific kind of silence that happens after something good finally arrives. Not the silence of peace. The silence of a system that doesn't know what to do with this. You got the apology you waited years for and felt nothing but suspicion. You got the relationship that finally treats you well and spent the first 6 months waiting for the version of them that hurts you. You got the compliment, the promotion, the quiet Sunday morning with nothing wrong, and instead of relief, something in you went very still, very alert, scanning for what you were missing. Nobody warns you about this part. Everyone prepares you for how to survive the bad things. Nobody prepares you for how disorienting it is when your mind refuses to let the good things in, when relief arrives and gets stopped at a door you didn't know you had installed. You've probably called yourself ungrateful for this. Broken, maybe. Incapable of happiness, like it's a skill everyone else was issued and you missed the class. You've watched other people receive kindness and simply enjoy it, uncomplicated, and wondered what's wrong with the wiring that keeps you from doing the same. Nothing is wrong with your wiring. It's doing exactly what it was trained to do. Somewhere back in the architecture of how you learn to survive, your nervous system made a decision it never told you about consciously, that good feelings were not safe to trust. Not because joy itself is dangerous, but because in your history, letting your guard down when things felt good was often followed by the thing getting taken away, or turning out to be conditional, or being the exact moment when everything fell apart. So your mind did what any intelligent survival system does. It stopped treating good as a resting state and started treating it as a countdown. This is not a story about negativity. It's a story about a mind that confused vigilance with safety so early and so thoroughly that it can no longer tell the difference between protecting you and imprisoning you. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly where that confusion started, why your body still enforces it even when your life has changed, and what it actually takes to let something good finish landing before your mind decides it has to brace for what comes next. Because there is a moment right at the edge of relief where you have a choice you don't even know you're making. And almost every time, without realizing it, you choose the brace instead of the breath. The room where nothing lands. Picture the moment exactly as it happens. Someone says something kind about you, something true, something you've secretly needed to hear for years. And for a fraction of a second you feel it. A warmth, an opening, something like relief moving toward your chest. And then it stops. Not dramatically. Nothing crashes. It's more like a door quietly closing before the warmth can fully enter the room. You nod. You say thank you. You might even smile convincingly. But internally the feeling has already been redirected, filed under nice but. You walk away from a genuinely good moment carrying almost none of it with you. This is the room where nothing lands. From the outside, it looks like a person receiving something good. From the inside, it's an intercept happening in real time, so fast and so practiced that you've probably never noticed it as a distinct event. You just know that good things slide off you while bad things stick for weeks. That asymmetry is not random. If a sharp comment from a stranger can occupy your mind for days but a sincere compliment evaporates in seconds, your mind isn't malfunctioning. It's running a filter built to give threat far more processing power than reassurance because somewhere in your history, threat was what actually determined whether you were safe. You're not choosing this filter consciously. You're not deciding, in the moment someone is kind to you, I will not let this in. If you were, you could simply decide otherwise. What's actually happening is a reflex, the same category of automatic response as flinching before a loud noise. Except this reflex isn't protecting you from a noise. It's protecting you from hope. Because hope, to a nervous system disappointed enough times, is not a pleasant feeling. It's a liability. Hope made the fall hurt worse. The last time good things turned out to be temporary. This is why you can logically know a good thing is happening and still not feel it. Knowing and feeling are processed differently, and the feeling part has been handed a specific job. Intercept anything that resembles the beginning of hope, before it can grow into something that might be taken from you. The question underneath all of this isn't why you can't enjoy good things. It's why your body decided that receiving was more dangerous than bracing. And that decision wasn't made in the moment you got the compliment. It was made much earlier, in rooms you may not remember clearly, by a version of you still small enough to believe that safety depended entirely on staying alert. You were trained to brace, not to receive. Nobody sits a child down and teaches them to distrust good things. It happens more quietly, in patterns repeated so often they stop looking like patterns and start looking like just how life is. Maybe it was a household where calm was never guaranteed to last, where a peaceful evening could turn without warning, where you learned to read a room before you learned to read a book. In a house like that, relaxing fully was never safe because relaxing meant you'd stop watching, and the moment you stopped watching was when things tended to go wrong. Maybe it wasn't chaos. Maybe it was quieter and harder to name. A household where affection was conditional, where love arrived when you performed well and receded when you didn't. In that environment, a child learns something devastating and completely rational. Good moments are not stable ground. They are the beginning of a countdown to whatever comes after. Either way, the lesson lands in the same place. Receiving becomes associated with risk, not because receiving is dangerous, but because the moments right after receiving something good were unpredictable. So your developing system did the only sensible thing it could. It stopped trusting the good moment on its own terms and started treating it as a signal to increase vigilance rather than decrease it. This is the part almost nobody explains. Bracing isn't the opposite of receiving. Bracing is what happens when a system tries to receive and protect itself at the same time. You didn't stop wanting good things. You learned to want them with one hand extended and the other ready to pull back, because pulling back in time was, once, the only thing that kept the disappointment from landing at full force. The bracing worked. It kept you functional. It got you through rooms that weren't safe to fully feel anything in. But bracing was never designed to be temporary. It runs indefinitely whether or not the room has changed. And your body hasn't caught up because bodies don't update their threat models just because circumstances did. They update through repeated evidence of safety. Evidence you've never given yours because you never stayed present long enough in a good moment for your body to learn that this time, nothing was coming to take it away. The body keeps score of safety, not happiness. Here's something your nervous system has never actually cared about: your happiness. What it cares about with total focus is your survival. And in the specific history of your own life, survival and happiness were not reliably the same project. Your body is not tracking whether you feel good. It's tracking whether you're safe. Those two overlap often enough that we assume they're the same measurement, but they are not, and the gap between them is exactly where this entire pattern lives. A moment of genuine happiness produces physiological changes, almost indistinguishable from vulnerability. Your guard lowers. Your muscles release tension you didn't know you were holding. Your attention, normally scanning for threat, softens onto the good thing in front of you. In evolutionary terms, this is exactly the state a predator would want you in: undefended, unaware, present. If your history taught your body that undefended moments were reliably followed by harm, chaos, conditional love, sudden loss, unpredictability, then it learned an equation that has nothing to do with logic and everything to do with pattern recognition. Undefended equals unsafe. And happiness, biologically, requires you to be at least partially undefended in order to feel it. Every time something good happens, you are asking your body to do two contradictory things at once: feel this fully, which requires lowering your guard, and stay safe, which your system has learned means keeping your guard up. It cannot do both, so it picks the one it has more evidence for, the one that has kept you functional for years. And happiness loses almost every time. Not because you don't want it, but because safety was always going to outrank it in a system trained on scarcity of safety. This also explains why anxiety can spike during good news just as easily as bad. It's not the valence of the event your body is reacting to. It's the drop in vigilance the event requires. A promotion, a proposal, a long-awaited reconciliation. All ask something of your body that feels disturbingly similar to what danger asks: stop scanning, let your guard down. And your body, trained by a different set of rules, refuses. You are not broken for reacting this way. You are running an old, extremely competent system on new data it was never given a chance to update on. The system worked. It's just still working on a threat that in most of the rooms you occupy now no longer exists. Why contentment can feel like a warning. There's a strange moment that people with this pattern know intimately. Everything is fine. Nothing is wrong. The house is quiet, the relationship stable, the week uneventful in the best possible way. And instead of relaxing into that, something in you tightens. A low hum of unease starts with no object, no clear threat, just a persistent sense that this is somehow too quiet. What's actually happening is that your system has learned to treat the absence of threat as suspicious, rather than as the goal. This makes sense once you trace it back. If chaos or conditional safety was the baseline of your early environment, calm was never the resting state. Calm was the pause before something happened. The quiet before a parent's mood shifted. In an unpredictable environment, quiet doesn't mean safe. It means unmonitored, its own kind of dangerous, because you can't prepare for what you're not watching for. So your system built an association that has quietly run your emotional life ever since. Contentment is not the finish line. Contentment is the setup, and the mind, trying to protect you, does what it always does when it senses a setup. It goes looking for the catch. This is why you might find yourself, in a genuinely good relationship, waiting for the person to reveal who they really are, as if kindness were a performance that will slip. Why you might feel a flicker of dread on a particularly good day. Why some people feel more comfortable during a crisis than during peace. A crisis, however painful, is familiar. Peace is the unknown territory. Here is the part that reframes everything. That dread you feel during good moments is not a premonition. It is not intuition warning you about something real. It is memory, dressed up as instinct, running a search for patterns that matched your past, and returning a false positive because the present doesn't contain the danger your body is bracing for. The tragedy is that this pattern becomes self-fulfilling, not because good things turn bad more often for you, but because you're so rarely present for them that they pass through you leaving no residue. You accumulate a life full of things that were, on paper, good, and yet don't feel like you got to have them. Not because they were taken away, because you were never fully there to receive them. This isn't a character flaw. It's what happens when a system built to survive unpredictability is placed inside a life that has become more stable and hasn't yet been given evidence to recalibrate. Your body isn't warning you about the present. It's still relitigating the past, using the good moment in front of you as the trigger. The secret cost of being the reliable one. There's a particular role that people with this wiring fall into, almost without choosing it. You become the reliable one, the steady one, the person others call when they're falling apart, not because you volunteered, but because you were, from very early on, extremely good at staying calm while everything around you wasn't. That skill didn't come from nowhere. If you grew up monitoring a room for shifts in mood, you became fluent in managing your own reactions so you wouldn't add to the volatility. You learned to hold your feelings quietly, to not need too much, to be the one who absorbs rather than the one who requires absorbing. It made you safer as a child. It made you indispensable as an adult. But there's a cost to being this reliable that almost nobody accounts for, because from the outside, reliability looks like strength, not injury. If your entire sense of safety in relationships has been built around being the one who holds things together, then receiving care yourself becomes a kind of role violation. Something in you doesn't know how to be the person being taken care of, because that was never a role you were allowed to occupy. So when someone offers you the same steadiness you've offered everyone else, a strange discomfort shows up. Not uncomplicated gratitude. Disorientation, like being handed a script for a character you've never played. You deflect care, minimize your needs, redirect attention back onto the other person, because the caretaker role feels more familiar than the role of someone being cared for. This is one of the quietest ways the pattern shows up, because it doesn't look like rejecting good things. It looks like generosity, easygoing, low maintenance, endlessly understanding. But underneath is the same old reflex. It is safer to give than to receive, because giving keeps you in control, and receiving requires trusting that someone's care for you isn't conditional on you continuing to earn it. What makes this especially painful is that the people who love you often want to give you the care you've spent years giving everyone else. They're not withholding it. You are quietly deflecting it, because some part of you never believed you were allowed to need anything back. And that belief didn't form because it's true. It formed because somewhere along the way, needing something and getting it consistently met were never reliably connected. When good things become evidence against you, something peculiar happens in a mind trained this way when a good thing undeniably arrives. Instead of relief, there's an immediate search, not for more good things, for the catch, for the fine print, for the exact spot where this is going to fall apart. Because a mind built on scarcity of safety has never fully believed that good things arrive without conditions attached. This search can look like over-analysis of someone's kindness. Why are they being this nice to me? What do they want? What am I going to owe them? It can look like deflecting compliments, because accepting one at face value would require trusting it's true. It can look like a superstitious dread that naming a good thing out loud will invite its opposite. As if joy were a resource with a hidden tax attached, and the tax always comes due. Here's the deeper mechanism. A mind trained on unpredictability doesn't just distrust bad things. It distrusts anything it can't fully explain. And unconditional good things are the hardest to explain, because they don't map onto a logic you can control. Bad things feel legible. You can trace a line from action to consequence. Good things that arrive simply because someone cares about you offer no such line. And a mind that survived by understanding causes finds unexplainable good things almost more unsettling than explainable bad ones. So the mind does something quietly devastating. It starts treating the good thing itself as evidence that something's wrong. If this feels too easy, too unearned, it must mean I'm missing something. It must mean the real cost hasn't shown up yet. This isn't paranoia. It's a coping strategy that made sense once, applied now to a context it was never designed for. There's a quieter version that involves no one else at all. The inability to enjoy your own accomplishments. You finish something you're proud of, and within minutes the mind has moved on to what could have been better, what's next, as if pausing to feel satisfaction would be carelessness. Satisfaction to a mind trained on scarcity feels dangerously close to complacency, and complacency was never safe. So the mind keeps you moving, using your own achievements as fuel for the old vigilance instead of letting them be what they are. This is the cruelest version of the pattern. The mechanism meant to protect you from loss becomes the thing that erodes the good thing slowly, from the inside, because nothing you receive is ever allowed to just be received. Everything must first survive an interrogation run on autopilot, hunting a threat that was real once in a different room, with different people, and has been quietly haunting every good thing that's tried to enter since. The difference between vigilance and life. Vigilance is exhausting in a way that's easy to underestimate, because it doesn't announce itself as effort. It feels like being careful, like common sense. But scanning for threat that isn't there is still scanning. Bracing for a blow that isn't coming is still bracing. And a body that has been doing this for years in every room pays a price that accumulates quietly until it doesn't anymore. This part rarely gets named because it doesn't look like a crisis. It looks like fatigue sleep doesn't fix. A hum of tension in your shoulders, your jaw, the base of your skull. They're so long you've stopped registering it as tension. Difficulty being fully present even during things you enjoy. A half-life lived one step removed from your own experience. Because full presence would require lowering a guard that's been running since before you can remember choosing it. There's a difference between surviving and living that becomes almost impossible to feel from the inside when vigilance has been your default for long enough. Because vigilance is genuinely good at survival. It kept you safe. It got you here. But a system optimized entirely for survival has little bandwidth left for anything else. And joy, connection, the aliveness of being fully inside a good moment, all require exactly the bandwidth vigilance is constantly consuming. When "is this safe" has been running at high volume for years, there isn't much left for "can I let this in," no matter how much you want to feel good things fully. What gets lost, slowly, almost imperceptibly, is your actual life, not the version you'd describe if someone asked how things are going, which might sound perfectly fine. The felt version, the one where you were actually there, fully, for the moments that were supposed to matter. Underneath the vigilance is a life that's been happening this entire time, and you've been standing just outside of most of it, guarding a door that, in this particular room, nothing has been trying to come through. The question this raises is uncomfortable but necessary. If vigilance has kept you safe at the cost of keeping you absent, what exactly have you been protecting? And from what? When the thing you're most afraid of losing might be the very life you haven't let yourself fully live yet. Why you trust pain more than you trust peace. There's an uncomfortable truth underneath this entire pattern, one that feels almost shameful to admit. Pain, for you, might feel more trustworthy than peace. Not more pleasant, not more desired. More trustworthy in the sense that you know exactly what to do with it, what it means, how to survive it. Peace, by comparison, can feel like unfamiliar terrain with no map. This isn't masochism, it's familiarity. And familiarity, to a nervous system, is a form of safety in itself. If pain or unpredictability was the emotional weather you grew up in, your internal navigation was calibrated against that weather. You know how to read it, how to brace for it, how to move through it without falling apart. It's terrible, but it's known. Peace doesn't come with the same instruction manual. If calm was never the norm, you may not know what to do with it when it arrives. It can feel less like relief and more like being lost, standing in a room with no landmarks, unsure what's supposed to happen next because nothing has to happen next. That absence of impending event can feel unbearable to a mind that's spent years organizing itself around anticipating the next thing. This is why some people find themselves drawn back toward chaos even after escaping it. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because chaos feels legible in a way peace doesn't yet. A partner who runs hot and cold can feel more magnetic than one who is steadily, boringly kind. Not because steady kindness is less valuable, but because inconsistency is familiar, and familiarity activates recognition, which is easily mistaken for attraction. The same mechanism plays out internally. A calm week can generate more anxiety than a difficult one, because the difficult week gives your vigilance a job, a clear target, a reason for the tension you're already carrying. The calm week removes the target but leaves the tension intact, floating without an object. Paradoxically, that can feel worse. At least during the hard week, the discomfort made sense. Here's the reframe that starts to loosen this. Trusting pain more than peace was never a flaw in your judgment. It was an accurate read of a specific, limited set of circumstances that shaped you before you had any say in the matter. Your body isn't wrong that pain, in your history, was predictable. It's operating on outdated evidence, applying an old, accurate map to a territory it hasn't yet had the chance to survey. Peace doesn't feel trustworthy yet, because you haven't accumulated enough evidence that it holds. The instability was always in your original environment, not in calm itself. And until your body gathers new evidence, repeated and undramatic, that peace can simply continue without collapsing, it will keep defaulting to the terrain it already knows how to survive. The moment you started editing your own joy. There was likely a specific kind of moment repeated enough to become a pattern, where you learned that showing joy openly came with a cost. Excitement met with mockery. Pride met with a comment designed to shrink it back down. Or simply a household where your happiness, if too visible, drew attention you'd learned to avoid, because attention in that environment wasn't always safe. Children learn remarkably fast what gets rewarded and what gets punished. If your joy was met with dismissal, envy, or a shift in someone's mood, you didn't need it explained twice. You began, quietly, to edit yourself in real time. Feel the good thing, but don't show too much of it. Want something, but not too visibly. Succeed, but immediately downplay it, so the success doesn't become a liability. The editing became so automatic it stopped feeling like editing. It became your personality, the modest one, the easygoing one. What looks like humility from the outside is often a well-rehearsed protective habit that learned one specific lesson. Visible joy invites a response you can't control, and the safest amount of joy to display is always slightly less than what you actually feel. Edit your joy for long enough, and the editing stops happening only externally. You start experiencing less of it internally, because the same system that dimmed your outward expression also learned to dim the internal signal before it reaches full volume. Why generate the full intensity of a feeling that will just have to be minimized anyway? It's more efficient to turn the volume down at the source. You're not just hiding your joy from others anymore. You're hiding it from yourself so thoroughly that you may have lost track of what full, unedited happiness even feels like in your body. When people ask what makes you happy, you find yourself reaching for an answer instead of simply knowing it. Because the pathway between feeling something and knowing you're feeling it has been narrowed for too long. There's a particular grief in recognizing this. Not about losing something external, but about realizing you've been rationing your own aliveness for years. Not because anyone is currently asking you to, but because a much younger version of you learned that rationing was the price of staying safe, and nobody ever came back to tell that younger version the rationing could stop. The good news is that a habit this automatic can also be unlearned, but only once you can actually see it happening. And seeing it requires understanding something most people never get told. The impulse to dim your joy is not a personality trait. It's a scar with a function, still doing the job it was built for, in a life that may no longer require that particular kind of protection. What numbness was actually protecting you from? It's worth asking a question you may have never asked directly. What would have happened if you had let yourself feel the full weight of joy, disappointment, love, and loss, unedited, at the age you first learned to dim them? The honest answer, for most people, is that it would have been too much for the resources available to you at the time. A child in an unpredictable environment can't process overwhelming emotion the way a supported adult might. If joy that gets taken away hurts, and you can't prevent it from being taken away, feeling it at full intensity only means absorbing the loss at full intensity too. Numbness, in that context, wasn't a failure to feel. It was an economy. A way of surviving repeated volatility without being flattened each time. The protection wasn't only from the pain of loss. It was protection from being seen as too much. Too excited, too sensitive, too visibly affected by things that were supposed to roll off you. In many households, the emotionally intense child becomes the problem to be managed rather than the child whose needs are met. Numbness doubled as a way to become smaller, less noticeable, less likely to become the target of frustration simply for feeling things at the volume they were actually occurring. There's a subtler protection at play. By not fully feeling good things, you also protected yourself from grieving what you weren't getting. If you'd felt the full size of how much you wanted steady love and consistent safety, you would also have had to feel the full size of not reliably having them. Numbness kept both the wanting and the lack at a survivable distance. Understanding this changes your entire relationship with your own numbness. It's not a defect to be criticized out of yourself through force of will. It's closer to scar tissue, formed around a wound that was real, and scar tissue can soften with the right conditions. But softening starts with understanding what it was for, rather than treating it as an enemy to defeat. You cannot outdiscipline a protective adaptation that was, at the time it formed, entirely correct about the danger it was responding to. You can only, slowly, give it new evidence that the danger has changed. Learning to let a feeling finish. Most people who carry this pattern have never experienced a full emotional cycle, start to finish, without interruption. Not because they're incapable, but because the interruption happens so early and automatically that it never registers as a choice. A good feeling begins, and before it can build, peak, and naturally resolve, the bracing reflex cuts it short, redirecting the energy into vigilance before the feeling gets to complete itself. This matters more than it sounds because emotions physiologically are waves, a beginning, a rise, a peak, a natural decline, and the body is built to process them through that entire arc. When a feeling gets interrupted partway through repeatedly, the body experiences it as unfinished business, which is part of why old joy can feel oddly inaccessible years later. It was never allowed to finish, so in some sense it's still incomplete, sitting there, unresolved. This is harder than it sounds because the urge to interrupt is not a thought you can overrule. It's a reflex, faster than conscious decision, and the first several times you try to stay present through it, you will likely brace anyway. This isn't failure. It's information. It tells you how fast and automatic the old pattern still is. Valuable data, not evidence that the work isn't working. What helps is slowing the moment down enough to notice the interruption as it happens. The exact instant your chest tightens in response to something good. The specific thought that starts scanning for the catch. You don't need to stop the reflex immediately. You need to start seeing it clearly, because a reflex you can see is a reflex slowly losing its automatic, invisible grip on you. From there, the practice becomes almost embarrassingly small, and that smallness is the point. A few extra seconds staying with a good feeling after you notice the urge to brace. A few seconds letting the warmth of a kind word actually sit in your chest instead of deflecting it. A few seconds staying in a peaceful moment without scanning for what's wrong with it. These seconds accumulate, not into sudden transformation, but into something more durable. A growing body of evidence that undefended moments can be survived, that the bracing wasn't required this time, that the warmth didn't cost you anything after all. This is how a nervous system actually updates. Through repetition, one completed feeling at a time, until completion starts to feel less foreign than interruption used to. The practice of staying when it's good. There's a specific courage that almost never gets named as courage because it doesn't look dramatic. The courage to stay in a good moment instead of leaving it early, whether that leaving happens physically or internally, through distraction, deflection, or the quiet retreat into vigilance. Staying, for someone with this pattern, can be harder than enduring difficulty because difficulty is familiar terrain and staying in goodness is not. Staying doesn't mean forcing yourself to feel something you don't. It means not leaving early. When a friend says something warm and true about you, staying means resisting the urge to joke it away, letting the sentence sit in the air a moment longer than feels comfortable. When something is going well, staying means noticing the hum of dread that wants to scan for the catch and deliberately not following it this time. This will feel unnatural for longer than you'd like, because you're not adjusting a habit. You're renegotiating a survival strategy that has been reliable for most of your life. Expect the old reflex to show up anyway, even after you understand exactly where it came from. Understanding a pattern doesn't erase it. It gives you the choice point that used to be invisible, and choice points, used repeatedly, are what eventually change the automatic response itself. It also helps to stop expecting this to feel good right away. Early attempts often feel more like tolerating vulnerability than enjoying anything. That's not a sign you're doing it wrong. Vulnerability is the actual texture of undefended presence, and your body has spent years associating that texture with danger. Feeling it without the danger materializing, over and over, is precisely what teaches your body a new equation. Undefended does not always mean unsafe. This is not a permanent fix arrived at through one insight or one video. It's a practice repeated in small, almost invisible moments across ordinary days, until staying stops being an act of courage and becomes, slowly, simply, how you live. What it means to finally let yourself have this. There will come a moment, maybe not today, maybe not for a while, when something good happens, and instead of the familiar tightening, the automatic scan for the catch, you notice something quieter. A pause. A breath that goes all the way down instead of catching halfway. A feeling allowed to simply be what it is, without being cross-examined for hidden costs. Letting yourself have this isn't a single decision made once. It's not a switch you flip after understanding where the pattern came from, even though understanding matters. It's smaller and slower. It's the 5th time you catch yourself deflecting a compliment and let it land instead. The 10th time you notice the dread during a peaceful evening and stay anyway. The 100th small, unremarkable moment where you simply don't brace and nothing bad happens, and your body files that away as new evidence. You are not required to trust peace fully before you're allowed to practice staying in it. That backward requirement, that you must feel safe before you're permitted to act safe, is exactly the trap that's kept this pattern running. The truth runs the other direction. Safety is built through repeated small embodied experiences of staying, not through waiting until staying feels natural before you start. There is a version of your life happening right now, full of small good things arriving quietly, a kind word, an ordinary evening with nothing wrong, a moment of being genuinely seen. That life has been happening whether or not you've been present to receive it. The good things were never the problem. The problem was a door, installed long ago by someone very young who needed it, standing between you and everything that's been trying, patiently, to reach you since. You don't have to tear that door down all at once. You just have to notice, the next time something good arrives, that your hand is on the handle, and you have a choice this time that you didn't have back then. You can let it in a little further than yesterday. You can stay a few seconds longer than the reflex wants. You can let this feeling finally be allowed to finish, because the good things were never the ones that needed to change. You did all the surviving that was required of you, exactly the way you needed to. What's left now isn't a battle. It's an invitation, extended quietly, again and again, every time something good shows up asking only one thing of you. Stay. Let it land. You are, finally, allowed to have this.